me a box over here. All right, so the session is being recorded and we'll start now. I am a couple of minutes late because my previous session, my 10 o'clock session, ran until somewhere close to 5 till, and I did need to run down the hall to the restroom real quick. So I'm back. Couple of things I do want to cover first before we get into any material on that we're doing this week. But let me look real quick to see which chapters we're on this week. Okay, so we're on chapter 3 and 4. First one is next week. This session's going to have to be changed on the time for it. I'm going to have it next week at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 11:30 next Tuesday morning, I've got to be at the Chamber of Commerce for their luncheon meeting, and it starts at 11:30, so I got to be there before then. That is the conclusion of the Leadership Walker program I have been in for the last year that the school had me in. The school paid for me to attend it, and that's the last item in it is graduation that day at the luncheon. It starts at 11:30, and I believe should be over by 1 or so, and so my 2 o'clock session and my 10 o'clock session should be fine that day. But this session, which is at 11 o'clock, that's obviously not going to work in there, so I am going to delay it to 3 o'clock next week. Now, while I'm on that, I'm going to go ahead and mention that 2 weeks after that, on the 21st, we're not going to have a collaborate session that week. That Monday is again a holiday, just like yesterday was. That'll be Juneteenth, which is a state holiday in Georgia starting last year. However, I don't think it is a state holiday in Florida. Apparently, if it is, Florida State College at Jacksonville, I have to always stop to pronounce that, is apparently not celebrating it on the 20th. I am in training all of that week down there in Jacksonville, Florida. And it runs basically, usually it runs like 8 to 5. It may be 8:30 or so, but it's somewhere 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, every day, Monday through Thursday. And then Friday, usually they let out about noon, actually with finishing up with lunch. And then I got to drive back home. That Sunday, I'll be driving down there. Needless to say, if you calculate that all up, I'm not getting a holiday that week. The other problem is because I'll be in class all day, that means I can't do these sessions at 10, 11, and 2. That's almost Dr. Pepper time. 10, 12, and 2, if I remember right. But I got sessions at 10, 11, and 2, but I can't do them because I'll be in class. I thought about it all weekend, trying to figure out how I could reschedule them, but it's just not going to work. So the discussion that will become available on the 20th and due on the 27th, y'all will have to do that discussion that week. Because I will be online in the evening answering emails. I will have to grade the discussion that is due that Monday, but that's not the one y'all have to do. Because the school says I got to grade the discussions every week, whether I'm here or not here and somewhere else, and busy the whole time. So I got to squeeze that in there. And I'll be answering emails hopefully all day long. It just depends how the class goes for the week. I fully suspect I'll be able to answer at different times throughout the day. And then I'll definitely answer in the evening. I do want to do a little for myself while I'm down there. I want to go eat out in St. Augustine at a restaurant I love their shrimp at. It's called Osteen's. And I go to it every year when I go to Jacksonville, and look forward to it. I've been looking forward to it since I was last there in June of 2019. So, because the training was canceled for the COVID, the next 2 years is the first time they're having it in person again. They actually did have it online, so I did do training with these people online each of those summers, but online is not quite the same as in person. I actually just finished a training class with them on Azure last Friday. Actually, not last Friday, the previous Friday. And it had run for 5 Fridays in a row, all day long each Friday. However, doing that while I was doing it, and I'd actually taken it a couple of years ago, that I was able to do some other things like some grading in the midst of listening to everything and watching. So in any event, we'll have to switch on that. Hopefully I can work on grading some in the evenings too, but I'm also, I think the hotel they got me at, usually they have me right across the river from the college, actually right across the river from downtown, and the college is right behind downtown. And from there, there is a, I'm gonna say subway, but subway's not, it's actually a skyway, but it's like a subway type thing, little car, actually small cars as opposed to most big city subways. These only seat 4 and only has standing room for about 4 or 5 people or 2 wheelchairs. And that I'll ride it normally across the river to the college and then have to walk about half a mile down the street in front of the college to the building where we meet at. However, the hotel they've got us at this year, I think it's more close to the beach. So I'd like to at least one evening or several times get out and go walk on the beach some. Haven't done that in a while. And also got I've got a former student that wants to meet me for lunch from many years ago, several colleges ago, that lives down there. Will meet me for supper, I mean. And so I'm hoping to do that one evening. And I've got a friend I grew up with that was there also that I got to see for the first time a few years ago. And hopefully he and I can go hang out for an evening and do some different stuff. We had a fun evening a couple of years ago. And then I may have to study some for the stuff I'm taking in class all day. So we'll wait and see what all happens there. So this will all be interesting. So, and the end of this week, I'll be answering emails, but I may not catch them quite as quick as normal on Thursday and Friday, because I am going to drive a car for a former student and friend out to Las Vegas, where they just moved to and got a real good job in cybersecurity. And then fly back on Sunday night. And I'll be here probably Monday afternoon and definitely be here Tuesday to do the session. I may be a little tired. But then I got to head out to something else for Kiwanis later that week. So it's going to be a hectic, busy summer. So, questions for me. The other part is next week, I believe it is. That you will, that they have the summer fest, whatever they're calling it. I believe it starts next week and runs next week at the different campuses. I will post the announcement in Blackboard, if I can find it down here again, about the days and where we're doing the stuff at. They feed lunch here. You got to have your college ID with you or know your student number. That's the 900 number to be able to get the free food. And then they usually have free giveaways. They've always in the past, but I never can promise that they definitely will do it again, but I'm quite sure they will. Give a t-shirt, and then they usually have some other giveaways that are giving too. So you may want to check that out and go to the campus closest to What chapter has the questions? I'm not sure what you're asking me about. Are you asking about questions within the activities or test questions, practice questions? Which one? Activity or test? You can do an A or a T. Okay. I'm not sure which ones have questions in them, but sometimes there are questions up here in the activities. If they do, answer them in your submittal. If they don't worry about it. But I'm not sure in terms of these, which ones they may have. Sometimes they do ask a question, sometimes they don't. They don't seem to as much in these books as they did before. But if they do ask you a question, do pay attention on. The networking one, when we get to that chapter, which may not even be in here. So y'all may not have any questions in these. So there may not be any questions there, but if there are, be sure to include answers for me. They're in that same Word document. All right, any other questions? Any other questions or comments? So chapter 3, you're going to be working with actually configuring and managing the server, which you've already been doing in the other 2 chapters. So that chapter should be fairly simple and straightforward. You are going to use WDS in there. And so they're going to go through and look at images and then about how to configure your services. Chapter 4 gets into your storage and file systems, and that you got a number of activities in that chapter to do about that. So they're going to talk about it as disk, and you'll see a hard disk, but be aware that on a lot of machines, and even if you're doing it on the cloud, you have the same options. That when you're talking about hard drives and stuff nowadays, it could be solid state drives. But they're going to work the same as far as from the operating system side as hard disk. So don't let that one panic you about you've got solid state drive on your machine, because like I do on my laptop, but sitting here working on this desktop here at the school, it's all hard drives. But you're moving to solid state drives for everything on it. They're much faster. So they go through and talk about those different type drives and the speeds on them. And bear in mind that the book is several years old, because it does take several years to get new versions out there. So it really doesn't mention solid state drives to you in particular there, but they're working the same from the Windows side. Actually, it's probably not your internet. It is probably the school's internet. Today, I came to y'all from the school instead of from home, and that's the reason I usually do it from home, is that the school internet is not very good in the mornings. So and that I have students comment on that all the time. The last session they didn't say anything about it on, but it could well be our connection from the school. So sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. I just realized I haven't even marked down attendance. So let me, I've got you marked, and I think you're the only one in here. Yep, you are. So they go on through, look at those different ones and about how to partition it up. I'm going to go back to look at this again. Actually, it does show you with a bad connection and me not with a very good connection. So mine's showing, mine bounces back and forth. It doesn't sit at excellent the whole time, but it is showing on you that your It says your experience is either fair or good, depending on how it bounces. So it's not, right at the moment, it's gone back to saying it's excellent up on you now. And mine's sitting at excellent. So maybe when I started watching it, that it decided they'd behave better, but yours just dropped back when yours dropped way off right there. So yours is bouncing all over the place. So your connection is having some issues. They lead you through that. They talk about your types of disk. There's basic disk, there's dynamic disk. Dynamic disk is the direction that you'd really like to go on stuff, but if it's the bootable disk, it's got to be basic. Dynamic ones are real simple to expand them, so that you can make your partition start off as one size and expand it to bigger, up to the size of the physical disk, except for on dynamic disk, you can actually put another disk in and expand that partition across physical disk. So then they talk about sector sizes a little bit. I wouldn't bog too much down on that. And then they talk about your formats, and that's your file systems. Do be aware of those. FAT file system is what Windows originally started out with, which was file allocation table. It was 64-bit Windows operating systems. You can still use FAT, but you're going to normally use NTFS, which is what came out back around 2000 and is used most of the time now. But some of your flash drives still use FAT or FAT32, particularly FAT32. Some of them can't use FAT, can't use NTFS, I mean. NTFS was one they developed for Windows NT, and it has been in use extensively for a long time, and that is still used out there. It's gone through upgrades to it, so it's actually version 5, I think we're on now, of that. NT, they never did really say what NT stood for, so you'll see it as new technology, next technology, so on, but Microsoft never really did come out with what NT stood for. So, but it is NTFS. It allows much larger files and a bunch more files on the same size space, which FAT had limitations on. If you're still using any floppy disk, they use FAT. And actually FAT32 is what's usually used, but it's usually still referred to as FAT. They also talk about REFS, Resilient File System, for large files out there, and using virtual disk. And so they do mention that one to you, but I have not seen anywhere else it be hardly mentioned. So just be aware of the REFS. And I don't know what in the world is done right there, but it just cut my head off. Something's weird right here. It's doing something weird in terms of what I'm seeing as a screen. Let me close this and see. And I just cut the bottom of myself off. Okay. So, but do be aware, NTFS and FAT definitely no. You will see those prepared. So they talk about preparing your new disk. They take you through stuff on doing that, partitioning it and creating your volumes. They also teach you how to do it using PowerShell. And then they teach you about working with virtual disk. And that you're actually already using virtual disk because you're using them within VirtualBox, because you created a virtual disk when you created the machine. So they show it to you in terms of with Hyper-V. And then they show you some stuff working on that. They talk about file sharing, which is where you can share your files. between users and where others can access them on your machine. They teach you on that some, and you'll particularly do that on servers because you want to share files among multiple people. And so they talk about your different type shares, and the administrative ones, default ones come with $signs on the end of them. So that's an easy one to spot. So be aware of that. And then they get into a little bit deeper on them. Mapping is where you can map a drive, so you can change the letter it is, or you can map a drive to just a folder, which is really neat in that you can make a folder look like it is an actual drive out there. So talk about that. The network file system for using where you're doing with the stuff dealing with it across the network. And then they get into your permissions where they should be the last things in the chapter of how you can set different permissions on there, both permissions of how you're sharing them and the local file and folder permissions of what you'll allow different types of people to do on there. And so they spend a good bit of little time on permissions, and definitely be aware of those and pay attention to the effective access. Remember, if you do a deny all, it's going to override everything else, but otherwise it will combine permissions together for you. And so they go through and have you do a number of things on that. So that there is basically the chapter, both chapters in a nutshell for you. Any questions for me today? I will try to get these grades posted out there today or tomorrow. And if I don't get them by tomorrow, it may be the beginning of next week before I get them. Because, like I said, I am going to take a long drive out to Las Vegas to deliver a car. And I'm flying back Sunday night. Mr. Spurlock's going to pick me up at the hotel next Monday morning. And I just realized he's out today because he's having some stuff done. I'll be, so I should be in Monday afternoon, or at least I'll be online Monday afternoon. I'll probably be online, but I will be online during the whole time answering emails. So if you have any questions, concerns, etc., email me. And I just may be a little slower in getting back because while I'm doing the driving, I'll be driving at least several hours at a time before I stop and check emails. But I'll try to check them regularly. And then once I get out there, I can thoroughly do stuff fine. And so, but at any point, send me emails. This last weekend, I was checking emails and working on classes all weekend. Actually, if you turned in your assignments before earlier yesterday, by yesterday morning, that were due today, they've actually been graded. And normally I don't grade things till after their due date, but I went ahead and started grading papers, and if they didn't have any problems with them. So I've actually got some grading already done of stuff that was due today. Normally I don't do that, but I did go ahead and work it ahead because I did spend a lot of time. The classes, I believe, are all fully set up at this point, so we'll be in good shape. All right, any questions for me? Hopefully you followed along listening good enough to understand what in the world I was saying. If there's not any questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And then I'm going to let y'all go, and I'll see y'all next Tuesday at the same, not at the same time next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, I will see y'all at 3 o'clock. And if you can't come at that point, remember, all you got to do is do the discussion instead. That's assigned on Monday of that week. That is due the next Monday. But I'm going to do the session that afternoon because I've got the conflict that morning at the time we're doing this session.